This video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thanks for letting me do this for so long. A wise man once said, Mortal Kombat! And I still don't really know what that means, but I've heard good things. You will struggle to find a franchise in all of gaming history that has made quite as many headlines and has had as many controversies as Mortal Kombat. This thing blew up in the 90s and quickly set about making sequels and movies and some honest-to-God horrifyingly bad video games. And since we now have more than 3 decades of a franchise to look back on, I suppose we should probably rank these, right? So yeah, we're gonna do that, and make sure you let me know your favourite Mortal Kombat game in a comment down below so I can point and laugh at you for being wrong. Hey, you gotta let me do it sometimes, come on now. I know what you're thinking, just how badly can you mess up a Mortal Kombat game? Surely they're fairly simple games to make, right? All you need is some fighters with semi-interesting skill sets and a disturbingly accurate understanding of human anatomy. Yeah, I have no idea how I'm gonna talk about the fatalities about YouTube being mad at me, so we have to work that one out as we go. Well, perhaps you're forgetting about spin-offs and how they can just completely drop the ball as soon as they step away from being a fighting game. Mortal Kombat Special Forces had a troubled development that saw key creatives leave midway through. Midway. And the end result is pretty atrocious. It's a 3D beat-em-up where the best thing you can say about it is that it's ambitious for a spin-off title. That it sure is, but it's also slow and clunky and graphically murky enough that I don't really know what's going on. Thank God this didn't take off and no one bought it. Which seems to be roughly the same reason why Mortal Kombat Onslaught is shutting down later this year. This very recent mobile game is honestly so weird to describe, so I'll say that it reminds me of a certain mobile game that every person on YouTube has promoted at one point in their lives. Mortal Kombat Shadow Legends is a, let's say a passive RPG, where you line up your crew and throw them at bad guys until you've idled your way to a billion different things that all need upgrading and summoning. It's not great, and sadly a drop in a insanely vast ocean of similar quote-unquote mobile RPGs, but at least Onslaught has some pretty awesome cutscenes. It's worth a watch on YouTube when you get a moment, and it will save you a lot of time of watching characters fight. And after those 2 mistakes, I almost feel bad that the next game I get to talk about is Mortal Kombat 4, which is definitely a mediocre game, but it's not really in the same conversation as where we've just come from. Like, there's arguments to be made that Special Forces is one of the worst games from the early 2000s, and Mortal Kombat 4 is merely a casualty of struggling to transition to 3D. See, it's not just Sonic, it didn't go well for a bunch of franchises. You ever see what Castlevania did? MK4 is scaled down at a time when it should be forging a path for its franchise, and it's an underwhelming mess of teething problems where the only real upside is some absolutely incredible ending cutscenes. Why is Jarek making this noise?
That's weird.
Mortal Kombat games come with so many re-releases that I've had to try very hard to keep it distilled to individual game releases, because I fear that if I didn't, this video would be about twice as long. Even so, I wanted to talk about Mortal Kombat Mobile separately, since on one hand, it's definitely an offshoot of Mortal Kombat 10, but on the other hand, it came out before 10 as an early preview of what to expect from the main release. Like a week before, but it still counts. It does better as a mobile game than Onslaught and is at least modeled to be a proper game, but it definitely had the feel of a game that had much less value once X had had its full release and everyone was up to speed with that. And now we're several years down the road, it's slipped into the usual mobile game pitfalls of microtransactions and ads out the wazoo. At least it's doing something to distance itself from X. If Special Forces being all bad and unfinished is putting you off the mere concept of a Mortal Kombat spin-off game, then maybe Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero can do something to change that. You can kind of see what they wanted to do here and have a whole raft of spin-offs that focus on individual characters, and for some reason, Sub-Zero's solo game is a lot more like traditional Mortal Kombat with the 2D perspective and a lot more fighting. It is an adventure game though, but one that uses traditional Mortal Kombat controls, and let's not mince words here, these controls do not work unless you're in a small arena fighting one guy, which is just basically Mortal Kombat. Anywhere else, and it's so clunky and so joyless that you're left to, once again, find immense entertainment in the cutscenes, except these ones are full motion video. I wonder what these guys are doing now. You know how NetherRealm Studios make all of the modern Mortal Kombat games and also the Injustice games? Well, 3 years before Injustice, we had Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe, which is the kind of crossover that makes sense now, but was a pretty wild idea at the time. I guess this is the reaction to Marvel vs. Capcom, which is fine, but the DC license meant that it was slapped with a teen rating and couldn't have gory fatalities. That's irritating because I always thought Batman would look better without his spine, but you gotta look elsewhere for that. The story mode is fun, if a bit stupid, and freefall combat was a nifty inclusion, but it annoys me how safe this game plays it beyond that. You don't need gore to make it work, but you do need a bit more consistency. At least more than you get here. Back before Smash Bros. Ultimate was pulling off minor miracles to squeeze every previous playable character in its roster, Mortal Kombat Armageddon somehow rammed 62 fighters into the same mid-2000s fighting game. This was an end-of-an-era game for Midway, since the reboot of NetherRealm was only 5 years away in 2006, so you can see Armageddon as one last hurrah for this particular style of Mortal Kombat game. As such, this game is full of so much to do that it can be a little daunting to approach, but between a robust story mode, a fun custom fighter system, and a Mario Kart little side thing, yeah, there's lots to do here. Large parts of Armageddon feel very similar to previous Mortal Kombat titles, but with minor tweaks, and you can see this most clearly with how many clones there are in that massive character roster. So there's some good stuff here, but also a few too many cut corners as well. Not deterred by Sub-Zero and Jax's spin-off games being mega butt-ass, Midway forged ahead with Liu Kang's spin-off titled Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. There was a small delay with this one since Midway realised that the last two spin-offs were terrible, and this time they've spent translating Mortal Kombat into an adventure game with a lot more competency than before. The story isn't amazing and the voice acting is rough, to put it nicely, but away from that, Shaolin Monks is a pretty decent game that brings in Kung Lao for the co-op, so you can do more of what everyone loves from Mortal Kombat: platforming. At least there's some fighting in this one and the combat has a lot more going for it, but why the platforms? The spikes I get, but why did we look at characters being able to jump in Mortal Kombat and think that they should be doing loads of this in the non-fighting games? Feels a bit like a waste of time. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance is a curious creature since it came out at a time when this franchise was suffering badly from overexposure. Even worse than that, Mortal Kombat was everywhere, but most of it was pretty awful, like Annihilation, the terrible movie that bombed so hard at the box office that it took 24 years to reboot, and I don't even want to mention you again. And so Deadly Alliance had to hit the ground with a bit of momentum to distance itself from what Mortal Kombat was sadly becoming known for. It was the first Mortal Kombat game to be released on consoles only, and with no arcade release, it could focus on modifying its game engine so that combat was a lot smoother. Deadly Alliance really got to grips with 3D and can show off some fluid animations and honestly pretty good graphics for the time. They even did some fine work with the GBA version. What's all this violence doing on my cute little Nintendo console? Following on from the success of Deadly Alliance, which brought some positive attention back to Mortal Kombat, Midway were looking to do more of the same with Mortal Kombat Deception. The strategy here was to just do more of what worked in Deadly Alliance and then add a bunch of new things wherever they could. A lot of the new features are hidden from the player, which seems to be a deliberate decision to tie into the deception part of the title. But most of them are really welcome additions like the new and improved Conquest mode and the new fatalities and chess combat? Yeah, technically some form of chess in this game in case you get bored of the fighting, and also this weird puzzle game. I don't know, there's lots to do here and it's a little more consistent in quality than it was in Deadly Alliance, and I quite like the chess minigame, so yeah, it's a bit better. Mortal Kombat 3 is surprisingly hard to rank. We're firmly in the 90s here, and the longer that decade ran, the more that Mortal Kombat started to decline in quality. If you asked anyone at the time how they felt about MK3, they would likely lament how lacking the character roster is, and how dumb the animalities are. Did you guys make up a new word just to put this in my brain? However, time and re-releases were kind to this game, and since I'm lumping all versions of a game together, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 makes up for everything with balance changes and new modes and so many characters returning and just a whole load of cool things that must have blown the minds of many arcade goers. Just make sure you're playing the arcade version because a lot of the console ports suffer from long loading times and poor optimization in general. Because the creators of these games secretly hate someone they've never met, we actually have 3 different games that fall under the label of being Mortal Kombat 1. Sort of. For now, I want to talk about the OG, which is the ship that launched 1,000 age ratings, since Mortal Kombat actually 1 from 1992 was so groundbreakingly violent and crucially wildly popular, the American government got involved and created the ESRB so that kids couldn't walk out of the store with a game so violent, I now don't think I can show the best bits on YouTube. I mean, what can you even say about Mortal Kombat? It's obviously very basic and only has 7 characters, but it made such a name for itself that they greenlit a movie within 3 years of it coming out. It offered a less refined but more gory fighting experience when compared to something like Street Fighter, and that is one hell of a unique selling point. You tell me who won in the end. You may be encouraged by the lack of modern games so far, and that's because they're all really good. They do tend to trip over some of the common issues of modern gaming, and as long as you stay away from the PC port of Mortal Kombat 10, you'll be so fine. This is where the variation system came in, so that every character has a bunch of different moves and playstyles to cycle through, which turns one of the best rosters in the franchise's history into one of a frankly incredible level of replayability. The monetization can get in the way and can sour an otherwise really nice experience, but you technically don't need to put down any money into this thing if you really don't want to. But hey, what if I'm missing out here? Maybe they do deserve more of my money. Anyway, that brings us screaming up to modern day and a Mortal Kombat game that somehow has both Homelander and Omni-Man in it. Hasn't Fortnite been such a wonderful influence on how we consume media? Mortal Kombat 1 is called Mortal Kombat 1 because of some shenanigans that happened in the last game, which has now created a new timeline for all of these wonderful boys and girls to disembowel each other, and is technically another reboot. I don't think it's the best that the current generation of Mortal Kombat games has to offer, but it doesn't really need to, since the guest characters go as hard as physically possible, and are doing so in a game that has undergone a fair amount of refinement over the past 12 years. Not the Switch version, which is a steaming dumpster fire, but apart from that, you're in for a good time. Just turn your brain off whenever it asks for more money. I've alluded to it a few times in this video, but NetherRealm's big reboot of Mortal Kombat in 2011 was both a momentous occasion and a landing that they stuck with expert precision. Honestly, like something out of the Olympics. When I think back to this game, the thing that stands out to me the most is the story. The gameplay is kept relatively simple since this is a reboot, and as long as everything works just fine, it's probably enough. Narratively though, it walks roughly the same path as the original, but with high-def graphics to really bring home how quintessential this game is as a reboot. Tag team battles are so much fun since they let you switch partners in and out of battle for a new layer of strategy, and the X-ray attacks are bonkers. Oh man, look at all of those X-rays. They're crazy, honestly. Do you reckon this video is age restricted yet? I'm enjoying the brief peace and tranquility before NetherRealm come out with Mortal Kombat 2 in a few years, and it becomes even harder to talk about the actual Mortal Kombat 2 from 1993. This was the perfect sequel at the perfect place and time. A fighting game that blows the original out of the water and goes some way towards competing with Street Fighter 2. It's hilarious how much the devs just didn't give a fuck about ESRB potentially making their lives harder, since Mortal Kombat 2 is so much more violent than the first game, and if anything, really justifies its mature rating. You've got a bigger cast of characters, an amazing art style that instantly transports me to a busy arcade in the 90s, and hey, there's even some wholesome friendship? Jax with the paper chain, I love it. And you gotta know that any game that ends up with a new timeline being created at the end of it has to be having a lot of fun, and we are lucky to be living in a time when the best Mortal Kombat game came out just 4 years ago. Yeah, I know Mortal Kombat 11 has the same issues with grinding progression that can be easily bypassed with 3 simple payments of $9.99 a month, but the difference is the game behind it, because 11 is prime reboot material only because they jammed this game with so many things. The variation system is now custom variation with a K, which boosts customization by a ridiculous number, and when you lay that on top of a perfectly refined combat system that slows things down a bit so that big hits feel absolutely massive, it makes Mortal Kombat 11 feel incredibly cathartic. Like you can show up, smack the shit out of someone, and ride off into the sunset. And the best thing is that no one is harmed in the process. Nope, definitely not. Friends till the end, for sure, trust me. So yeah, that was me ranking all the Mortal Kombat games. Do you agree? Is there a different game you'd have at number 1? Let me know in a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, hit subscribe for more, and hit that bell for notifications of every new upload. Last week I talked about fake game overs, so make sure you go watch that. And I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including the Green Scorpion, Sarah Malion, and Lima Pro. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.